Welcome to Mind Your Small Business, a brand new podcast from AXA which makes starting or running a business easier. This week we're going to chat about something that is critically important for all of us, but especially self-employed folk: work-life balance and mental health. I'm Gordon Rutherford from AXA, and this week I'm delighted to be joined by Anne Kapoor and Simon Gallacher. Anne launched her business, Festival in a Bag, in spring of 2019. It's an incredibly innovative one-stop solution for festival goers with all of your essentials in one rucksack. Simon's business is a little bit younger. His company, RDAM Consulting Limited, which specialises in consultancy and evaluation and education, launched in July last year. So, good morning, Anne and Simon.
Good morning.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. Let's begin by finding out a little bit more about what you both do. So, starting with you, Anne, please tell our listeners a little bit more about Festival in a Bag and why you started it.
It came about Christmas time 2018, and I just thought, what was I going to do for 2019? I'd been in education before that, teaching, and I decided just to change track completely, employment-wise. And I thought, what would my children be doing at some point during the year? And I thought, well, festivals. I started to source just camping gear, but then I thought, well, everybody's doing camping gear, I need to offer something different. And it was a sort of a light bulb moment at the kitchen table, and I decided that I needed to design a rucksack and fill that rucksack, so it became a one-stop shop for camping gear. And it saved mums like me having to drive around buying stuff, begging and borrowing, only to have it trashed or left behind. So we make all of our products that are in the bag sustainable and accountable. So we encourage people not to leave anything behind at festivals. And
that's amazing.
And it took off, yeah.
I mean, it's really amazing. It's such a simple idea, as many of the best ideas are, but it's incredibly effective, and it's exactly what every festival goer needs, I guess. And the same question for you, Simon. What's RDAM Consulting all about, and what was the catalyst for it?
Well, the catalyst was taken from a planned redundancy from the previous organisation I've been working for, and I've been working in and around education, research, evaluation, policy, mostly to do with science, technology, mathematics and digital skills for over 25 years. And the organisation I was working for up until last July was beginning to withdraw from its kind of student-facing programmes, the very active things, and to concentrate its work more on research, which is a very sensible strategic decision for them. So I began to plan for my redundancy from about back end of 2019 and into the start of spring 2020. And the prospect of taking redundancy and starting something new in summer of 2020 seemed great in January, February 2020. And then something else came along in the shape of a pandemic, and the planning had to kind of change somewhat. And it seemed what originally felt like quite a good idea and a good solid plan suddenly began to feel slightly less certain. Because the whole world and the whole environment which I was working in was going to be rather uncertain. But undaunted, I carried on and established myself in July 2020 and have been offering these research advice, consultancy, policy making interventions to a range of different hosts since then. And thankfully, he says, reaching for the nearest bit of wood, it's been going pretty well so far.
Okay, excellent. I mean, thanks, Simon. And listen, we're going to return to that thing about starting a business in the pandemic very shortly. But before we do, let's look at some data, because we always like to kind of kick off the session by looking at some numbers. And one of the interesting stats I have today is, according to Mental Health UK, 80% of small business owners report having symptoms of poor mental health. And a recent article in Forbes reported that 30% of small business owners are working more than 50 hours a week. So it's clear that running your own business can be extremely rewarding, but it's also very demanding. And you're in the throes of your toughest, at any small business's toughest period, Simon, in the first 12 months. And you alluded to that. And, not only is it a tough time, the first 12 months, but you did it in the midst of the pandemic. And when you reflect on those numbers that I've spoken about, can you identify yourself? Can you resonate? Do they resonate with you in some way?
I absolutely think they do. And I think you've always got that moment, particularly when you're self-employed, of waking up at 3 a.m. thinking, where's the next contract coming from, or where's the next bit of business coming from? And because when you're in a full-time employed role, you're kind of guaranteed that there will be income by and large at the end of every month. So thinking ahead and planning ahead and being able to develop a pipeline of business is quite a preoccupying thought for the first few months. And so undoubtedly you do spend a lot of mental energy, and that can be quite draining, sometimes thinking that through and constantly rehearsing it. I was fortunate, I suppose, in many ways that I've got a friend who started up a coaching and mentoring business and was looking for guinea pigs to practice on. And so we would periodically go for walks around the local park and just talk things through like this. And I think we probably both found it in many ways very helpful. But it was a good thing for me at the very start, just to know that there was something I could refer to and who wasn't immediately family, because I think it's one doesn't always want to burden the people immediately around you with what you're dealing with and what you're thinking about when you're starting up.
No, for sure. And I think that's so important, to be able to turn to someone else and be able to share your thoughts and seek advice and do that kind of thing. And I mean, turning to yourself and getting back to the numbers there, is it something that you can relate to, the amount of time that it takes to actually invest in the business from a self-employed perspective?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think I sort of, as I'm now into the end of my middle of my third year, having had a dead year last year, I've learned how it's quite a cyclical business. So in some respects, I'm really, really busy, and I spend a lot of hours sourcing products and doing marketing, etc. And then I'll have quite a lot of time down because that's all set in place, and I can just press a button and it'll run on social media or whatever. But when it is sort of coming up to now October time, when all the festivals are announcing for next year, 2022, that's when a lot of my time will be taken up speaking with them, dealing with them, and then there'll be a lull after Christmas. So I wouldn't say I'm busy, every day of every week, but I probably spend too much time worrying about the time I'm spending on it. If I, like Simon, I sometimes wake up at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning and think, oh gosh, I could put this in, or I could put that, take that out. But I don't need to do that because I know that the product works the way it's set up to work. So it's a difficult one to answer for me because it is a cyclical business. But my mental health has been okay. I've learnt now how it works, basically. And in terms of getting feedback from people, I have a great group of friends that I can talk to. My children, who are much older now, all that when their friends come round, I talk to them about the product and ask them what they think honestly. I don't need to be flattered. I just need to know whether they think it's good or bad or what could be tweaked. And that's a great boost to confidence, and that obviously affects your mental health and your well-being. So yeah, I'm happy with the way things are in that area. I think Anne's made a really good point there, which is the feedback, which can be from immediate family around you, but it can also be from clients as well, which is always kind of quite reassuring to remind yourself that you're actually quite good at what you do. And that's why you get the business. That's why you get people coming to you and asking you to do work, and that's a nice vindication of the fact that you're doing something purposeful, something worthwhile, and you should allow yourself to enjoy that.
No, of course, because
yeah, you're great, Anne.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, something we touched on in an earlier episode was the whole imposter syndrome thing, and I think most self-employed people who are out there on their own do suffer from that. So I think it is that whole idea of seeking feedback and reassurance that you are qualified to do what you do, and you are good at it, and you can add value to people. I think that's really important. And just staying with yourself, Anne. You gave a really good answer when talking about how you manage the workload and how it's cyclical. What do you find the most challenging thing is when looking after your mental health?
Actually, staying focused on many different things. I'm not sort of panicking and just throwing my hands in the air and thinking what's going on. I try to be quite measured in what I do. I have obviously my time for my family, for my house, for my golf, for my festival in a bag. And I try and make sure that I cover each one with an equal amount of time. If things get extremely busy or I'm called upon more for work, then I just drop one of the others, to a degree, so that I can manage it. I try not to get too overwhelmed with things, generally. Yeah. Thanks,
Anne. And the toughest thing for you, Simon?
I think Anne's put it rather nicely there, is that kind of keeping all the plates spinning at the same time, and periodically the odd one does crash to the ground, and that's life, and you just have to pick up the pieces, glue it back together again, stick it on. I'm very similar to Anne. Try and structure things. I will work by my calendar, try and systematize and calendarize everything I can, and then if you have to move things around and juggle, because again, if you've got family, you've got to sometimes just drop everything and respond to them, or friends equally, or indeed clients who suddenly say, "Can you just do this for me?" And you kind of think, "Okay, deep breath, let's do that," and you do it. So you do that. But I think the upside of being self-employed is actually being in control of that timing. A lot of the time, you can renegotiate your workload. You can push things around, and sometimes you can create space to actually make sure you've got that downtime, that time away, which is all important because you do need to recharge.
Oh, sure. And this is possibly a leading question, but both of you sound as though you are the kind of people who can cope with multiple plates juggling or plates spinning at the same time. Is that a trait that is inherent in people, that they are able to cope with these things much more easily for some people? Or do you think people can do certain things to train themselves to be better at coping with that and keeping all the plates spinning at the same time?
Ooh, tricky question. I'd probably confess to being slightly control freakish. And so actually being on my own means I've got my hands on everything, so I can do it. And I don't know if that's a traditional character trait of people that go into business on their own, but I quite like the fact that it's me responsible for all these little moving components. And periodically work with other colleagues and work in teams, and we all delegate roles and do things for each other, and that's great and fine. But I quite like the it's just me kind of element to it. Don't know about you, Anne.
If I could just give you a little bit of history, that when I moved from Liverpool down to London decades ago, I was, a sort of shy, retiring flower who wouldn't say boo to a goose. And I think I've learnt through business over the years how to talk to people. I've developed an understanding of business, and that's given me confidence to talk to people and to take risks and to approach people that I wouldn't ordinarily have gone to for advice, for sourcing products. I've done a lot of that on my own, but I've trusted myself to know that what I've done is the right thing. I'm not a control freak, but I like things my way. And it's not always that easy when you've got, say, I've got investors in my company now, so it's not always that easy when they have their ideas, and they come from big business, and mine's a small business. And sometimes I think that the smaller business has a better angle on things because you understand your clients more, because you talk to them. Whereas from the big business point of view, it's all corporate decisions and things. So I would say that I've had to sort of lose part of my controlling aspect over my business and my mindset, and try and adapt slightly to theirs as well.
Okay. Interesting. I want to kind of stay in that theme of working on your own, because so many self-employed people work on their own, and they work kind of independently. And many of them, a great many of them, actually work from home, which causes kind of sometimes psychological friction between what is home life and what is work life. And I think that's something that increasingly people have felt in the last 18 months, not only self-employed people, because everybody has been working from home. And I guess that can bring a sense of a kind of claustrophobia, and I know a lot of self-employed people do struggle with the isolation part of it. I mean, how do you cope with that, Simon? Or are you just the kind of person who's quite happy to crack on your own?
I'm quite happy to crack on my own, and actually I was talking to Anne just before we came onto the broadcast about the fact that the space I sit in to work at home is on the direct route to the kitchen. So with my wife, children, others, barreling through at various points in the day to get tea, coffee, lunch, which for late teenage children can be about 2 p.m. It's always busy, and my computer's always here. And that's sometimes, sitting at night and I turn my head from watching telly and I can see my computer on my desk and think, it'd be nice to put that away at some point. It'd be nice if it was somewhere else. That's a small price to pay for being able to do what I do. So I kind of look at it I hope to try and take a very balanced perspective on it, and actually quite enjoy the informality of various family members appearing in the back of Zoom calls, asking where the bread is and things like this. It sort of humanises the world of Zoom sometimes, and makes everybody realise that this is what we're doing and we have to deal with it. So it doesn't bother me really, to be quite honest.
Okay.
I have to say the same for me. We've historically worked from home anyway, and during COVID it wasn't much different than we would have done normally. So we're sort of well set to cope with all the interruptions of cats walking past the Zoom meeting, or just not having to make such an effort to appear for a meeting well dressed or whatever I hate to say, but it's for us, we have a room where we have all our computers and our work, and at the end of the day we just turn it all off and park it till the next day. So that unlike Sam, it's not in the corner of our eye saying, please look at me, because I don't want to do that. I can't. I don't need to do that because the way my business works. So
I think, Anne, I'd write to your story about moving down from Liverpool as the shy retiring violet, and I think that's probably something which I kind of developed over the years as well, is this kind of girding yourself up to network. I think for younger people starting up a new business, the regular refrain of the power and the importance of networks is never far away, and it can be quite daunting. Well, I think when you're in your early career stages to be that person,
absolutely,
who's quite happy to, metaphorically knock on the door or send the email, and hold your own in a conversation with someone who you might feel is going to work with you or benefit your business. So I think for younger people starting off a business in the past year or so, that if they haven't got those networks established, that's a hard thing to do.
Very hard.
And particularly from just sitting in front of your computer.
Yeah, and it's that looking somebody in the eye and shaking the hand, isn't it?
Yeah,
you don't get that. That's key to any meeting, I think.
Yeah,
sets the tone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas
it really
over Zoom, it's a very much relaxed affair. Obviously, it's serious. It's about your business, but it's far more relaxed.
Yeah.
Which may be good for some people and not so good for others. That's up for the jury to decide.
I think that's right. I think it is probably ultimately just different, and we're just going to have to adapt how we do networking to different media. But it doesn't have the same quality as actually going and sitting and having a coffee with someone and talking about what you want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, and thanks both. And just staying with you for a second, because You spoke a little earlier and you reflected on, when you moved down from Liverpool and, you were thinking of the past. And many of our listeners tune into this podcast because they are thinking of doing what both of you have done, and that is to go out on their own. And when you look back to when you started out in your business, what do you wish you had known about, having to spin all the necessary plates and maintaining a healthy work-life balance?
I think initially the amount of time that it took, having a light bulb moment at the kitchen table is great, but when you start to follow it through with all the components that you need to make a business successful, it takes a lot of time, a lot of research, and you have to go to so many people. You have to ask them lots of questions. Some will give you the right ones, some will give you the wrong answers, and I think it's weighing up that and sort of knowing your customer or your client takes time. Don't just have a sort of knee-jerk reaction and go with the first person that says they can offer you something really cheap, because it may be cheap but it might not be the right product. It might fall apart. So I think just be calm, just take time to consider, make charts, do whatever you have to do, however you work, post-it notes, whatever, and weigh up the pros and cons, but don't rush into something. That if it's a great business idea, it will always be a great business idea, and it will work at some point. It doesn't have to work straight away.
And Simon, same question?
The thing which I suppose I've dwelt on most in this period has been trying to establish that kind of regularity of work coming through, and talking to other people who'd done it before I jumped into this. There was always a conversation about feast and famine. That sometimes you're overburdened, and other times it's really kind of quite starkly absent of work. So that's been a preoccupying thought for me, is how to create that. And like Anne say, not panicking if there are quiet times, and using that time constructively, using that time to maybe go back to your networks and start kind of using them or finding ways to engage with them in order to hopefully create more opportunities in the future. So I think it's a bit like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Toe, I suppose. It just says don't panic on it. And I think that's been the kind of mantra that sits somewhere in the back of my head. Don't panic.
No, indeed, and I think the feast and famine thing's a really interesting topic, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but in next week's episode we're going to talk about accounting and cash flow, and the cash flow thing when you're self-employed is absolutely something that will impact on your mental health at some point, purely because of that feast and famine nature of the beast. And we were looking there at what you wish you could have foreseen when you were starting your business, and I bet that you could have foreseen COVID, because you've started a business that's built upon the plethora of festivals that abound today, and then suddenly they stopped overnight. So, I mean, how did that affect your mental health when suddenly, your lifeblood was cut off? Really,
I was shocked. Mainly because I felt a huge responsibility to the people who'd invested in my company, because I'd gone from being super successful to absolutely nothing, and they must have thought, what on earth is going on? But they're all related within the music festival industry, and obviously they got it, and I was probably small fry in the dealings with the actual big festival organisers and things, but I just think that it's hard. I know that there's a future in the business. They've stuck with me. They know there is. They know that a lot of the festivals couldn't run because of insurance issues, etc., cancellations, and they know that we're there for 2022 when the festival season will kick off hugely for next year. So that's what really we're waiting for, and any disappointment that we've had over this past 18 months is, as you say, unforeseen, but we've got through it with some terrific press and great exposure on social media. So I can only hope going forward that that all transfers into great sales and even more publicity.
I think it will, because I think there's going to be more appetite for festivals than ever before, because I think people now understand, what they've missed out on, and it's great to see that festivals have restarted. And I know that Green Man was last weekend, which is a big festival. And we could probably talk about music festivals for the next 2 hours, but we won't. Let's come back to you, Simon. And you obviously established your business, and we touched on this kind of briefly earlier. But you established your business just around the time the pandemic was starting. Do you think it made it easier to cope mentally because you were just starting out and you were aware of everything that was going on at that time?
Yeah, I think I went into it with my eyes wide open. The only uncertainty being is looking at the sorts of work I was trying to gather into my organisation. So contract work, bidding for tenders, was whether or not that was just going to dry up, because lots of the organisations I would hope to have worked for were just going to sit tight because the future looked so uncertain. But as it transpired, that sort of 3 to 6 month kind of project work was still there. So after they took a pause, that sort of work started to come out again. But having looked at it from the kind of early part, just when the pandemic was beginning to look real, so early March 2020, there was a moment we thought, oh, this could possibly have been the worst possible time. The only thing I could have done worse was start up a company to do something with festivals, I think. But I think this could just be quite risky, and so I'm just going to have to hold true to what I want to do, and remember not to panic, and to start using those networks assiduously. And actually, one of the things which I know we all mostly hate it, but sometimes love it, is LinkedIn, and being able to use that as a place to say, this is me, this is what I'm doing now, I'm available, actually did trigger quite a lot of interest. So I'd go back to sticking true to your kind of faith in what you're doing, reminding yourself that you're actually quite good, and use those networks, use them really well, and that's both for business but also for that verification, vindication, feedback about what you're doing, which is also part of the mental health mix, of reminding yourself that you're pretty good at what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of ask one final question, if I can, before we wrap up for today. And just briefly, and I want to stay with you for this one, Simon, just now. You've obviously started a business and you've come through that challenging first 12 months. So congratulations. It's a massive achievement in the context of where we've come from. What advice would you give to someone out there who may be listening to this? They may be running their own business, but they're struggling to maintain a healthy work-life balance.
That's a $64 million question. A lot of things which I've done have been around structure and planning, and giving yourself the most kind of certain platform you can to do what it is you want to do. So kind of eliminating all the risky bits, eliminating uncertainties from what you're proposing to do, and then being quite proactive, and again dwelling on what Anne said about the transition from being young and a bit kind of gauche to being not pushy, but being prepared to put yourself forward in order to generate new opportunities and to build new business. And when you need to, put your hand up, find people that you can talk to, that you can unload on, for want of a better expression, and share some of the tougher things that you're facing, because, and I think we were talking about this earlier, you're not the first person to have done this. In terms of setting up a business, you're probably not the first person to have hit some of these snags. So there's bound to be someone within your network, family or otherwise, who can reflect on that experience with you, and possibly even just make you feel better, because it's not just you, but also be able to give you a bit of coaching and say, well, you might want to think about this, you might want to try that. And sometimes that can even be there are kind of local groups, the local coaching groups that my colleague has started up is offering that sort of support and guidance to new people as well. So you have to probably lift your head up and look, and be prepared to speak to people. That sounds terribly simple, but it's quite effective.
These things often
it's
are
key to health. Yeah.
And what about yourself, Anne? What's the one kind of gold nugget of advice you would give to someone out there who may be struggling to maintain a healthy work-life balance?
I think just to know when to switch off. It's difficult when you have commitments, as I do, to my investors, and I do feel personally responsible for the way the business runs. But they're great support for me, and my friends are great support. So I can talk to each of them in different ways, and that genuinely does help me get through my work. I think I alluded to the fact that I take a day off a week to play golf. I don't take my phone with me on that day because I want to stay focused on enjoying my day out without distraction. I come back to all the emails and the messages of where are you, we need this, we need that. But I've learnt how to cope with that. And I think taking time for yourself and not having this reaction to answering emails quickly or social media posts straight away or press comments, you don't need to do it straight away. We didn't used to do it straight away 15, 20 years ago. You'd have a measured time to make a response. And so I'm learning now that I don't have to respond straight away, and then that takes some pressure off me. And I think that's helped me to understand that I can walk away to a degree and nothing's going to happen to the business. It's still going to be there at the end of the day.
Thank you, Anne. So much great insight and words of wisdom today from both Anne and Simon. And as always, I'm going to finish up like every good night, and that is with the key takeaways. So, I mean, I think Anne spoke latterly there about the having the ability to switch off and the need to switch off. And, you know, Anne spoke about going out in the golf course and leaving the phone behind, so not being distracted by that, so that you're immersed in the moment and you can really genuinely have some downtime and unwind and do something that you socially enjoy and that brings you pleasure. Simon spoke about structure being critical, and I do think that's important. Actually, one of the earlier episodes in this series was all about structure and planning and organising, and if that's something you find a challenge, then maybe check that out. There's some great tips from our guests in that. And I love the two things that you both spoke about, speaking about the advantages and the benefits of feedback from other people, just to remind you that you can do what you're doing and you are good at it, and also taking advice from other people, because you shouldn't feel alone. Hopefully there's somebody out there you can speak to and share your feelings with, and they can help you manage these really difficult situations. And it's not a sign of weakness to go to somebody and say, I'm kind of struggling with this just now. How do we cope with it? How do I cope with it? So some great takeaways. I do hope it's been really helpful to all of our listeners today. All that's left to say is a massive thank you to Anne Kapoor from Festival in a Bag and Simon Gallacher from RDAM Consulting Limited. And festivals are here again. They're here to stay now. People need you. How can they find you?
Go to www.festivalinabag, all one word, .co.uk. And we're there on social media, Instagram and Facebook. So take a look.
Fantastic. And Simon?
Oh, I'm much less socially media aware than Anne is, so you can just find me on LinkedIn, and that's my home.
Fantastic. Once again, thank you to both Anne and Simon for that today. And if you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to the series via your usual podcast app. And if you want to find out more about the Mind Your Small Business series, you can do so at www.axa.co.uk/podcast. You can also get loads of brilliant small business advice from AXA's Business Guardian Angels site, which is at www.axa.co.uk. And all that's left to say is a reminder about next week's episode is a topic that ain't sexy, but it's pretty critical for any business. It's all about the numbers, accounting and cash flow. So join me, Gordon Rutherford, and another couple of special guests for that. We look forward to welcoming you, and thank you.